It's November 22nd, and the strange side of history awaits. Today, we have a president struck down, a mutiny at sea, and a mountain that roared. Let's begin. On November 22nd, 1963, the world watched a moment in history fracture into mystery. President John F. Kennedy rolled through Dealey Plaza. Sunlight flashed off the chrome, and crowds cheered right up until the sound that would silence everything. A single shot, then another, echoing off buildings like the city itself was calling out, and the president was dead. Within hours, officials arrested a former Marine named Lee Harvey Oswald, but that's where the story stops making sense. Eyewitnesses reported hearing shots from multiple directions. Photographs taken from that day vanished from official archives. Ballistic evidence didn't clearly align with the angles investigators insisted were correct. Even the timeline felt impossibly tight. Behind closed doors, documents were stamped classified and locked away. Intelligence agencies denied involvement, and even traces of surveillance, phone taps, and prior knowledge began to surface in redacted memos. Decades later, some of those files still remain hidden, fueling speculation that the event was far bigger and far darker than a lone gunman. Research points to testimonials of silent witnesses who later changed their stories and reported strange activity around Oswald in the weeks leading up to the assassination. To this day, the official account remains one of the most debated in American history. Even now, every newly released document seems to raise more questions than it answers, and with every clue, the truth seems to slip even further away. On November 22nd, 1910, Brazil awoke to the sound of gunfire rolling across Guanabara Bay, and to a mutiny that would shake its nation to the core. It began aboard the Brazilian battleships, massive steel giants anchored peacefully in the water, but beneath the decks, tension had boiled for years. Sailors, many of them poor, young, and recently conscripted, lived under brutal discipline, floggings, lashings, punishment from another century. And on that night, something finally snapped. A mutiny, known as the Revolt of the Lash, ignited with terrifying precision. Armed soldiers stormed the deck, seizing control of 4 of the most powerful warships in the Brazilian Navy. For hours, the artillery thundered across the bay. The city trembled and civilians fled to the streets. By the end of the uprising, over 30 souls were lost, including both sailors and civilians caught in the chaos. The government, paralyzed by the threat of its own battleships pointing inward, negotiated in fear, offering amnesty to just keep the fleet from leaving Rio de Janeiro. But the mystery lingers because after the revolt ended, many of the mutineers disappeared into prisons, remote postings, or worse, some simply vanished from records entirely. Some historians believe the real punishment came quietly, far from any witnesses, and the real story of the mutiny was buried along with the sailors who would never be seen again. On November 22nd, 1994, people living beneath Mount Merapi woke to a quiet, ordinary morning, with no sign that Indonesia's most feared volcano was about to awaken. For months, it had been calm. Scientists saw nothing alarming, and the villagers heard nothing unusual. But deep inside the mountain, pressure was rising, silent, unseen, and waiting. Just after midday, the ground trembled. A low, rolling growl echoed through the crater, and witnesses described it like an animal waking up, angry. Merapi erupted in a violent burst, releasing scorching clouds of ash and gas that raced down the slopes faster than anyone could outrun. Villages who had lived their entire lives under the volcano suddenly found themselves surrounded by darkness and choking heat. The eruption only lasted minutes, but the impact was devastating. By the time the ash settled, over 60 souls were lost, most caught in the sudden surge. Survivors described it as the moment the mountain exhaled, a single unstoppable breath that changed everything. What made this event so unsettling wasn't the eruption itself, but how it happened. No major tremors, no warning signs, no gradual buildup. Merapi, one of the most heavily monitored volcanoes in the world, had simply erupted out of nowhere. To this day, Merapi waits, silent, unpredictable, and watching. The survivors whispered that it chooses its moments deliberately, as if the mountain itself has a will no one can predict. Another day, another strange bite from history. Like, comment, and subscribe. Your next eerie dose is just a day away.